Harry Massey is a pioneer in the field of bioenergetics, which goes beyond biochemistry by integrating physics, biology, and clinical research. His mission is dedicated to eradicating needless disease and suffering, which grew out of his own research into health as he sought to overcome 7 bedridden years of serious illness in his youth. Harry has invented a number of clinical technologies, including a health analysis system that scans the energy fields of the body, an electrotherapy device that is able to reduce pain and inflammation in the body called a MyHealth, and an advanced homeopathy through imprinting healthy epigenetic information into water called infoceuticals, which in turn triggers a health response in the body. His website is nesshealth.com, neshealth.com, and he's currently working on a mobile scanning app and a health and self-help education platform tailored to the individual's scan results. He's also passionate about filmmaking that helps to educate the public on ways they can improve their health and their lives. He made the best-selling documentary thelivingmatrixmovie.com and Choice Point, Align Your Purpose. His latest movie, superchargedmovie.com, features Dave Asprey, Joe Polish, Gerard Pollack, Dr. Steven Sinatra, and Sarah Turner. Hello, everyone. My name is Wendy Myers. Welcome to the Supercharged podcast. I'm talking today with Ness Health founder Harry Massey, and we are doing this podcast together. It's so exciting. I love talking about bioenergetics and how it impacts our health. Today, we're going to be talking about quantum biology and how this relates to health. We're going to be talking about some underlying concepts about quantum physics. It's going to be kind of a heady podcast, but necessary to help you understand exactly what quantum, bioenergetics is all about. So, Harry, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Wendy. Well, it's always great to catch up. I mean, we were both together only a few days ago at the annual Genius Network meeting, and that was pretty interesting because there was Naveen Jain there who he built a company that's trying to mine asteroids out in space, but also got a company called Vion that is that's actually also got a similar mission to both of us, which is to make illness a choice. So yeah, it was nice meeting up with him. And anyway,
yeah, that was so much fun. Yeah, that was so much fun hanging out with all the millionaires and billionaires and people that have really exciting companies that are trying to help other people. And Naveen Jain is such a nice guy. And I love that concept that illness is a choice. And I think also with bioenergetics, that really hits home even more, because I think with how bioenergetics is going to affect modern medicine and change how people are facilitating physical change in their body is going to be so much more effective with bioenergetics, and really make it, hold that true, that illness is a choice.
Well, I mean it truly is, and I mean, just to make the choice really clear for people. If you're going with pharmaceuticals, like if you're going with the pharmaceutical sort of lobby and taking your pills, the CEOs of pharmaceutical companies, literally their job is to keep people on those pharmaceuticals for basically for as long as possible, because that's how they make profit, that's how they make money. Their job, and the pharmaceuticals company's job, is not to cure illness, is not to heal illness. It is basically to keep people on a chemical for as long as possible. Unfortunately, of course, when you take a lot of chemicals, they are pretty toxic, and you drop dead in the end. And that's one choice. And and the other, there's many other choices for getting your health back, but the biochemistry choice, I would say, is not a good one.
Yeah, there's more than one way to skin a chicken, and the reason I'm here to teach people about bioenergetics is because, number one, it's helped me so much, and also because my father died as a result of polypharmacy, being on 10 medications statins leading to diabetes, leading to cancer, and then ultimately the cancer treatments, killing him within 6 months of his diagnosis. And bioenergetics is the future of medicine. And that's why I'm here talking with you, trying to educate the audience about how dramatically bioenergetics can impact their health and impact their family's health. And it's such an easier, less expensive, far more effective protocol than what is offered in modern medicine. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how quantum physics and how it relates to your health outcomes specifically. So we're going to get into some heady stuff here, but I think it's very, very fascinating for people to understand some basic concepts about quantum physics so they can understand how bioenergetics affects their biology.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we should get into it. I mean, I love the quantum aspect, and quantum physics is. It's not necessarily a day-to-day thing yet. Our everyday reality is basically built. I mean, all the word quantum means, so it doesn't freak people out, it just means really all the word quantum is small. It just means it's a small packet of something. So what we're going to talk about today is basically the world of the very, very small, and then how that applies to getting your health back, which is pretty interesting territory.
So just for anyone needing a basic primer, what is quantum physics?
So quantum physics is basically the physics of the very, very, very small. So it basically means we're looking at reality at a subatomic level. And the thing in quantum physics is the rules basically start to change, because in our conventional normal type of reality, things sort of obey like Newtonian type principles. Like if you drop something, gravity works and the phone will hit the ground, or with mechanics, things just obey these sort of more normal rules. But when you get into the quantum world, the rules of reality start to change and actually start to get really, really weird. And people might have heard of these concepts of quantum superposition, quantum entanglement, and quantum coherence, which we'll get into in a minute. But basically, particles can start to do all these crazy things, like they can seem to be in many places at once. Things are able to communicate non-locally. People talk about this sort of particle wave duality of, like, is it actually a particle or is it a wave? And basically, when you're looking at the very, very, very small, things actually start to disappear. Sort of reality seems to turn into actually just pure energy fields, and sort of just possibilities. And it gets pretty interesting. But the most curious thing of all of it is our everyday world ultimately, is constructed of the very, very small. There is no separation between our day-to-day lives and quantum physics. Yet very rarely do we actually think about how quantum physics really affects our life, and especially our health. And it has massive implications for health, just massive.
Yeah, and I started doing your program, Ness Health, a year ago, and I've learned about so many different concepts related to quantum physics and how our bodies communicate, about how they communicate, and we have like an energetic field where all this communication is happening on the quantum level, and it's completely revolutionized how I think about our health, how our health is affected, and how we produce true health, how people meet their health goals. And so let's talk about some of the top principles in quantum physics, just kind of, a textbook review of what the top principles are. Let's start with quantum superposition.
Sure. So quantum superposition, basically what that's inferring is that a particle can be in multiple places at once. So basically it's referring to how a particle is really a wave before an observer has observed it. And I don't know if you've heard of the observer effect, but it's basically a very classical experiment where you basically fire some photons through what's called the double slit experiment, and the question is sort of which slit does the photon go through, and basically the end result of that is a photon basically goes through the slit depending on where you actually observe. So if the observer is looking at slit A, the photon goes through there, and if they're looking at slit B, they go through there. But the reality is it's actually a wave, and it's actually sort of going. It's actually in all positions or multiple places at once. But only the observer, which another way of saying the observer is intention, and another way of saying intention is thought. So basically, the experimenter's thought processes are able to change where a particle is. So that's basically quantum superposition.
Okay, and let's talk about quantum entanglement.
Well, quantum entanglement, that's a really interesting one as well. But basically, a particle is able to, what it basically is saying is that a particle is able to have a relationship with another particle so that it's able to communicate non-locally. And that word non-locally, all that means is basically that you can get instantaneous communication at a distance between one particle and another. And the simple fact of reality is absolutely everything in our world and in our bodies and in our lives is actually entangled with each other, and we're all basically this set of relationships between each other, and every single cell in your body is able to communicate with every other cell in your body, and actually every cell in my body is able to communicate with every cell in your body, Wendy, which is, we're sort of having quantum sex right now, which is pretty interesting.
Or we're just having a quantum relationship.
We're having a quantum relationship. Why does that matter for health and for biology? Well, it basically opens up this whole, as I say, we talked about biochemistry a bit. We're all used to this idea that you need a chemical running around your bloodstream to tell each cell what to do, to communicate. But that isn't the only communication system. In fact, there's a far superior, or way more efficient communication system that happens because of quantum entanglement. Basically, every single cell is able to communicate with every single other cell in the body. So, and if that's true, which it is, it basically means the coordination and control problems of the body are solved, because it is an age-old question in biology and health. What's actually the ultimate control system of the body? It's like, well, it's chemistry, and people are like, well, chemistry is too slow. Well, what's controlling the chemistry? Well, it's genes, and then, but the genes just seem to be this library. They're just some bunch of proteins, and then some bright spot said, well, it's the master gene that controls the other gene. Well, what controls the master gene? And it sort of all ends up in bullshit, frankly.
Yeah.
But you need this sort of other control system, which is in bioenergetic terms we call the body field, but in quantum terms, it's basically because of quantum entanglement that absolutely everything in the body is communicating instantaneously and non-locally.
Yeah, and an example of that, there's a lot of scientific research to show this, is how when we're trying to heal our body, say you have cancer, you have a health issue, you need to be sending positive healing messages to your body. And with that positive thinking, you can elicit a profound change in healing or eradication of a disease by constantly, doing imagery, imagining your immune system killing that disease or killing that infection or whatever the case may be, and it works amazingly well. Or you can send negative messages. Why is this happening to me? I feel sick. I'm always in pain. I don't want this. Fighting it, and you release all these stress chemicals and like inflammation, all these other negative things start happening in your body. And there's a lot of research to support this. So that's kind of one explanation of quantum entanglement.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And let's talk about coherence. So this is the last concept we're going to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. Hold on to your hat because it's not the simplest. It's not the simplest concept. So its definition is that all. Just remember that in quantum a particle can be a wave, and then basically, which just means it's in multiple places at once till the observer effects comes in. But what quantum coherence is saying is that all parts of the wave, they basically have an intelligence that's able to feel out the most efficient path. And what it's basically saying is that there's a source of intelligence or information that's basically directing how a wave turns into particle and what path it goes down. Now that might sound like doubly Dutch, but I'll just give a really concrete example. So if you take photosynthesis, photosynthesis is it is a complete miracle. But basically, believe it or not, when a photon hits, it basically hits a leaf, it's able to know exactly. It's able to take not 90%, not 50%, the 100% most efficient path through the leaf to be able to, like when it's in structured water inside the leaf, to be able to charge and spin off an electron, which is basically the fuel. It's basically the energy source of the plant. It basically knows exactly it basically knows the exact most efficient path to get through the leaf and out the other side to transfer as much energy from that light particle while it's in the leaf. I mean, that's sort of insane. But the reason it's able to do that is it's basically this rule out of quantum physics of quantum coherence that there is actually an intelligence, and we, in our bioenergetic world, I call that information. But basically, there's an intelligence behind the path of a quantum particle. And obviously this is happening in photosynthesis, but it's basically happening in many other biological processes in our body. And this really is why you can call it bioenergetics, or you could call it information medicine, but it's one of the most primary reasons basically why information is able to affect the body, because this concept, maybe I guess we haven't explained that for listeners, but if there's like if you're looking at energy, there's a pattern behind energy which is the information. Like, information basically describes how energy is working, and you're able to affect health both through energy, through optimizing energy, but also the information that's behind the energy, or if you like, that's directing the energy with exactly what to do, which is pretty amazing. But it's not some woo concept. It's just a very it's well, I say those three things in quantum physics. They're very, very well researched. And it's basically the fundamental building blocks of our reality is quantum superposition, quantum entanglement, quantum coherence. And as you sort of go up into life and reality, those are the fundamental building blocks underneath everything. And that's also why something as intangible as information can actually affect your body. It's because information is able to direct, or is basically able to direct particles and energy within your body to take the most efficient path to make your body work properly.
Yeah, and these are concepts. The quantum concept is something we're going to be talking on this podcast about how it relates to our health and how we can quantumly affect health in a positive way. But this is also something that's being used in computers. Quantum computers is the wave of the future. Quantum telecommunications is possible with our cell phones. There's a lot of different industries that are going to be using communications in a quantum way because it's far more efficient and lucrative in those industries. So, but we're going to bring it back down to health. So what does quantum physics have to do with health and our biology? How do we affect changes in our cells quantumly?
How do we affect? Well, basically because we want to change or improve that quantum coherence. So generally, when someone's sick or you have disease, there's a variety of ways of looking at that. But a simple way of looking at that is basically your control system has gone wrong. Like, if you're sick, basically means a cell is not doing what it's supposed to. Why are different cells not doing what they're supposed to? Because they're getting the wrong information. They're getting the wrong instructions. That field network between all of the cells has gone wrong. From a quantum point of view, or that concept of quantum coherence, we want to make the body field, that interconnecting communication between all the cells, more coherent again. We want it to become completely efficient. So I should have perhaps said that. So in a leaf, when photosynthesis is happening, if the plant has a disease, quantum coherence starts disappearing. It starts becoming more inefficient. But when something is working optimally, it has coherence, and that's because the information behind it is directing communication in the proper way.
So when you say the human body field, you're referring to our body's energetic field that we have, and that's where the majority of communication takes place to then facilitate change in our physical body. And so let's talk a little bit about that concept. So I think a lot of people understand how our cells work physically, our body works physically, and our body communicates with hormones and chemicals and pharmaceutical drugs can foster a change in our body physically. But let's talk about how our cells communicate at a distance without physically touching, without physical communication.
Sure. So imagine you've got a cell. And on the cell membrane, you have little protein receptors that sort of pop up. Now, I guess the normal way of thinking about it is these protein receptors a chemical molecule comes along. It basically it interacts with that protein, and that protein basically gives the cell an instruction, and the cell does what it does, which might be like unveil a new bit of genetic material, might be growth, repair, etc., etc. Now that's all well and good, and those chemical receptors absolutely exist, but it's not the only mechanism that's going on. There's also receptors. They're actually the same receptors, but if you like, you could imagine them as different receptors. There's basically also receptors that are able to pick up field messages. And what I mean by the field is there's basically information and energy fields that are occurring in the body, and these field receptors, when they pick up a message, they basically then instruct the cell with exactly what to do. So if you like, we have these sort of two. We basically have these sort of two communication systems going on in the body. One is the conventional biochemistry communication system, which, by the way, is rather slow and inefficient. A chemical has to travel down the blood and get to the cell, and then it does something, etc., etc. And then supposedly that cell creates another chemical that flows somewhere else and does something else. And that isn't a very good way of coordinating trillions of cells, in the majesty that we call life, because we literally have trillions of reactions going on every single second in, 60 trillion cells in our body, let alone the hundreds of trillions of bacteria that are also communicating, which is a whole, I guess, different question.
And how quickly everything happens
And how
cannot be
quickly it happens.
explained physically. The amount of ATP produced in our mitochondria, our little cells powerhouses, that amount of energy cannot power the little that's produced, cannot account for how much energy our body actually uses.
Yeah, I think it's around 25% of the energy in your body comes from food, and the other major source of energy is basically sunlight and radiant heat and electrons, but mostly I say it's radiant heat. But yeah.
Yeah, and so and that is all taken in, and we also have source energy as well, where we are able to create energy in our body's energetic field, to power our bodies. So everything is interconnected in our universe, and you've talked about some of these concepts. Can you explain that a little bit more about how everything in our universe is connected and how so many different things like EMFs and other things can affect our body's energetic field and physical functioning?
Yeah, absolutely. So in that second concept, we were talking about quantum entanglement. That's basically saying that particles each have a relationship with each other. Now, that's actually true at all sort of levels of reality, if you like. When we're looking at ourselves and how we're interacting with the world, basically, like as I say, like me and Wendy are entangled. If I have a thought, even though Wendy and me may not be talking on the phone, she might have the same thought at the same time. Like if I think of a thought and think of Wendy, most likely she'll have that thought and think, she'll think of Harry and that thought. And, you can't necessarily say, did I think it first or Wendy thought it first? Like it just happens at the same time. And, I'm sure people will have lots of examples of the phone rings and exactly who it is because the instantaneous communication of that information, like that just happens instantaneously, and then you pick up the phone and, oh yeah, by golly, you were right. And a lot of Ness was created like that, actually. Like Peter used to live in Spain and I used to live in England, and yeah, we would do that every day, have these sort of great ideas, and then we talk to each other in the evening and relay the same ideas to each other, and it's like, okay, cool. I mean, that's sort of like a lot of Ness got built through quantum entanglement. Same with a lot of our films actually got built through quantum entanglement, which is it's a much more efficient way. You don't have to explain everything on the phone call. And of course, the closer the relationships you have with people, the more entangled you get, and the more that happens. And I remember way back, I think I didn't know that till I was 26, I think. And curiously, as soon as I read about that, you just suddenly start noticing it just happen in your life continuously. And it might have happened before and I didn't notice it, but I think once I noticed it, I'm pretty sure it happened a lot more, which was, pretty fun.
Yeah, I'm really thankful for Ness Health and even you introducing me to bioenergetics and bringing a lot more awareness to how intuitive I am. I make me kind of think about things, oh, that's coincidences, or so you're saying things at the same time, and little coincidences like this, but I didn't realize how profoundly being aware of your intuition and receiving other people's positive or negative messages or whatever, how much that can dramatically, positively impact your life when you have awareness of that, because you also become more responsible about the messages you're sending out into the universe. Like am I thinking positive thoughts today? That's going to affect my body physically. Am I sending positive effects about this person? That's going to affect that relationship. And so we can take those same kind of concepts and think about how can we facilitate change in the body on an energetic level to produce physical health. And that's what this whole podcast is about, and all the different modalities we discuss on this podcast.
Yeah, well, the strength of the interaction between your thought processes and everything that goes on in your life is just incredible. Like when you're and people say, well, yeah, if you're negative, you attract negative. You're positive, you attract positive. But it really is much deeper than just sort of these interactions. But I mean, literally, if you're full of all these fears and thinking all this stuff, unfortunately, because of quantum entanglement, these scenarios start basically playing in your life because you're entangled with these people and other things around you. Now those thoughts get picked up in their head without you ever saying anything, and then they relay back negativity to you, and you just get in this horrible little cycle. And the exact opposite can happen. And I always try and catch myself if I go into these spins, and obviously we all do. But that is a big reason why meditation, I think, has proven out over thousands of years to be so helpful for people, because it does sort of gives people a space each day to sort of stop, sort of ground themselves, get some reflection time, and stop their negative thinking, and turn it around into the positive. But yeah, one of the reasons it has all these great impact on your life, it's not just that it calms you down. It actually helps entangle things in a more positive light with all the other people who are picking up those thoughts, which is to a great benefit.
Yeah, and that leads into a discussion about individual consciousness creating information fields over time that create a collective consciousness. Can you talk a little about that?
That was quite a statement, Wendy. Sure.
I've been thinking a lot about this.
Well, this is good. Yeah, so, well, as I say, thought is basically no different to this concept of information. I mean, thought is basically an information field. And, well, this is pretty deep, but okay, we're on a deep podcast, so we might as well go there. So over the millions and millions of years of evolution of animals on the planet, what is this thing called consciousness, and where does life come from? And it is an age-old sort of philosophical debate, if you like, of what reality is. And yeah, for those of you who've watched The Matrix, The Matrix is just a whole load of information, software code. And actually, that's not so far off what reality probably is. From a physics point of view, the ultimate building block of the universe is information. Information is more primary, back to that concept of quantum coherence. Information is more primary than actual energy. People have argued, over thousands of years at this point, that the consciousness, is really the sort of the fundamental thing, is sort of behind reality. And the more we're thinking, and all of our consciousness and thoughts, and therefore information fields, are all interacting over time, it ends up creating this collective consciousness, which basically is, if you like, is our collective reality. I know that's pretty deep. Is that? I'm getting into philosophy at this point.
Well, let's talk about maybe an example of that. So an example is the pair studies. And can you talk about that just to help kind of explain these concepts?
Yes, it is actually a really good example. So, yeah, and sometimes when we're talking about these things, I think we can all recognize that people's thoughts can be in tandem, and people know all sorts of instances of sort of psychic phenomena. But where the pair studies comes in is it's not just thought to thought or person to person. Your actual thought or consciousness can actually affect something physical. Now, remember, all something physical is actually information and energy. Fundamentally, it's not anything physical. And basically, Princeton University, over a 25-year period, they did thousands of experiments where they were basically seeing if someone through intention could affect a physical outcome. And so they chose something quite relatively subtle, which was random events. So, and a random event is just basically, if you like, it's like flipping a coin. Like if a coin is heads or if it's tails, when you flip it, it's randomly either head or tails. And most of the time, well, it should come out 50-50 if sort of reality is normal. But what they found is actually the coin flip would come out more of the time heads if someone was focusing on heads, and more of the time tails if they were focusing on tails. Now, it's not like all the time, it was around 54% of the time. And they then tried that with radioactive decay as a source of randomness, with pseudo-random numbers as a source of randomness, coin flips, marbles going down a pinball machine, like all sorts of different forms. And yeah, I mean, the end result of all that research is they basically proved that consciousness and intention was able, just pure thought was able to change, to change our physical reality, which is mind blowing actually. I mean, it is and it isn't. Like if you're into quantum physics, yeah, it makes sense. If you're not into quantum physics, which most of us, we're definitely not born with that, and we're definitely not taught at school, and it's not part of our everyday life like that. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But yeah, but anyway, the research has proven that out.
Yeah, and it's almost like the power of prayer, where groups of people get together to pray to help someone in the hospital or help someone that's died, or whatever the intent is, because that does really powerfully affect the person who's the focus of the prayer.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It does have really important ramifications for health and healing. And when, for instance, like when you're with a practitioner or even just as yourself, it is really important on both the side of the practitioner and the side of the client or the person trying to get well, as much as one can, to have positive thought about it. And what I mean by that is, like, visualize the outcome of you getting well, like visualize what it looks like. And if that seems too extreme because you're in a really diseased, ill state and you can't quite visualize yourself running marathons, that's okay. Just take it way back and just visualize what a relatively small improvement would be. And if your practitioner does the same, the coherence of that thought, well, across both the practitioner and the client, along with any therapy that you're doing, and whether that's bioenergetics or anything else, doesn't necessarily matter. That's basically going to boost the outcome. And one way of looking at that is of course the placebo effect. But the reason the placebo effect works is literally because of quantum entanglement. I mean, the placebo effect is a great thing, and you always want to try and optimize that. Like, it's the worst thing in the world to deny the placebo effect or be skeptical of it, all of that, because that basically is saying, well, I'm not going to use the power of my intention and my own thought or others to help get me better. And by default, if you do that, most of you kind of stay ill. Unfortunately, like without that effect, it is hard to get better. So really, when you're trying to get well, like from my point of view, like you optimize everything. Like optimize great nutrition. Wendy's obviously teaches a lot about detox. You want to optimize your thought, you want to optimize the therapies. Obviously, I think bioenergetics is best, but there's a lot of others. If you tackle things from all of those aspects, that gives you the best chance to get well.
Yeah, and one thing that makes me really angry is when people are at their conventional medical doctor and they get a diagnosis, say an autoimmune disease, and the doctor says there is no cure. Or they have a cancer diagnosis and say you have 3 months to live. Those lies.
Well, it kills.
Lies.
Yeah.
They kill people, and they have this black cloud over them, that they have this belief that then translates into biology. That it actually elicits a physical death sentence.
It is exactly. I mean, yeah, the opposite of placebo is nocebo, and it's obviously equally as strong. I mean, they say the placebo is around whatever, I think 30 to 35% generally, that if it's done properly. I think you can get it way up to 50% through, or even higher through, really good focused intention. And it's exactly as you say, the same with the nocebo. Like, you massively decrease their chances through that. Yeah, through announcing death sentences. I mean, it's
irresponsible. It's so irresponsible, and that's coming from a place of their inability or the lack of their toolkit
Yeah, ignorance
Yeah,
ultimately.
it's
Yeah.
ignorance and the lack of knowledge. Maybe they don't, they just don't, they're just saying, I don't have the tools to help you. That's really what that is. So you have control in your health. I have no control over this helicopter, but you have control in your health and the power of positive thinking to and visualizing healing to elicit a healing change in your body. It's incredibly powerful. We had Bruce Lipton on the podcast previously talking about the biology of belief and the whole concepts around that. Super, super interesting podcast. And so let's talk a little bit more about how does quantum biology affect our concept of modern medicine? So
Well,
let's help
yeah, I
people
guess that.
make that shift.
Well, I think. Well, obviously we've talked about placebo and nocebo. I mean, yeah, in the ideal world, doctors in medicine school would be taught about how to optimize placebo. We'd all be studying how to get the placebo to work. Instead of 35 or 50%, get it to work 80% of the time. I mean, God, if we knew that, we would solve all the health problems completely. And that would be one thing. The other thing I find really interesting in medicine is this concept of the double blind trial. Now, in a quantum world where you have entanglement, the particle is not blind. The particle is connected by definition, and that has some pretty interesting ramifications. And if you look into a lot of the trials that have been done, well, I mean, all trials that have been done, you'll notice that the drugs that are passed that come out onto the market, their double-blind trial data is generally really high initially. And then, strangely enough, over 10, 15 years, it goes to basically to zilch placebo, and then it often goes below zilch into negative territory where, you read reports of it, killing off gazillions of people and all of that type of stuff. And then if you look at the drugs that have been withdrawn from the market, I know it was Vioxx that was withdrawn 5 years ago. I mean, there's been a number of drugs that got withdrawn because of all their nasty effects. Yet initially they were published as extremely positive, else they wouldn't have been published. And then they went to sort of neutral, and then they go to negative, and you're just like, well, why is that? And the chemistry effect is one thing. I think the chemistry effect was basically mostly a toxic effect, and wasn't generally any good. But the placebo side of it, because there's no such thing as double blind, how do I put it? So basically, all of the researchers, all of the people in the trial, the media who might have been publishing stories about this great promising new drug trial, there's there might be hundreds of thousands of people thinking in their head, and maybe a few hundred at least are very concentrated, all have really positive expectations of that drug outcome. Now that collective consciousness behind it will basically spikes the data, even though it's double blind, because of quantum entanglement, because there's no such thing as blind in quantum. Now as that effect goes away, and people are on to their next drug research trial and this and that, there isn't much intention behind it. There's not much consciousness behind them anymore, and it sort of dissipates, and and then it can go to a negative place too. It's probably just the toxic effect of the chemical. But I find that pretty interesting. I read about that in which was it? It was I think it was The Economist, and and the New Scientist. It was a few years ago. It was a great article on just sort of doing this big data analysis on all of the double blind trials, like over like a 30-year period of a drug, of like how successful they were and how the curve just drops off. Yeah. I mean, it was pretty interesting. Now, obviously, I can't necessarily prove it's a quantum effect, but at least that's my belief.
Yes, and I just love talking to you about these concepts and bioenergetics. This is just what really lights my fire these days, and because for so long, since I was a teenager, reading about in Scientific American, all the drugs and the most exciting drugs and cancer treatments and the double blind trials and just all these things that modern medicine holds in such high esteem as the gold standard in the studies. Really, a lot of that for me has fallen away. That kind of
Yeah,
holding that in esteem.
it's a house of cards. I mean,
Yeah.
it is unfortunate, but yeah, the scientific it's a hard one. I mean, the scientific method that we've built. God, yeah, I mean, modern society's built so much off the scientific method. Does have some big flaws behind it, but which really come down to the quantum rules underneath our reality. But yeah, if we sort of understood and studied those, and then created new scientific models or other ways of doing trials that sort of took that into account, we would be in a better place than we are today, and hopefully that era will start to come.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be the person designing that study for sure.
No,
So,
no, it's not. It's not pretty straight. It's not that straightforward. I mean, one way we're looking at it is like, I guess back to that concept of the holo. Well, if you look at a drug trial, for instance, another issue there is with that is it's just looking. It's you've got this isolated chemical, and it's saying, let's look at this isolated effect on the body. Does it get rid of diabetes? Does it reduce inflammation? Does it reduce arterial plaque? Whatever it's being designed to do. It's just looking at one thing, and the trial isn't concerned with the other, goodness knows, X trillion reactions that are happening in the body, and how that chemical may be affecting everything else that then has all these side effects. But the outcome of the trial is positive if it does what the study was designed for, and then they just list side effects as though that's sort of a secondary issue. But I say one solution is just collect all data. I'm more of a fan of the big data approach. We just collect everything that happens to a body during a trial. I think we'd be in a better place. And it's something we're doing to a degree, because like with our cloud software, we basically collect every single scan result. So we're only looking at 440 factors in our bioenergetic scan, but that's a lot better than just looking at one factor. So we're trying to look at the body more holistically across it of what's happening. And I think it's a start, but for sure it gets pretty intricate when you get into all that stuff.
yeah, and I'm really excited to see the results of the study that you're conducting. I mean,
Oh, I have got a little bit. I can give you a little tidbit.
yes. Yeah, I know to date you have 16 million scans you're analyzing, 440 data points. And and I know you're trying to bring this quantum bioenergetic software that you've created and bring a more science behind it to validate what it is that you're saying. So tell us some of the preliminary results of this new
Yeah,
study
I
you're
mean
conducting.
it's pretty. Yeah, so we've looked. Well, yeah, so we've looked at it was 40 over the last year. This is out of 44,000 data points from the last year. In that, we've basically seen a nice 30% jump in people's wellness scores. So basically, people were scoring themselves from 0 to 10 on how well they were feeling in between session 1 and 2. And we've got a nice 30% rise between those first two scans. So that's a nice just bit of initial data. I mean, it hasn't been written up properly yet, but when it's properly published, obviously we will share that and tell people more. But
Yes.
it's a good indication anyway.
So let's talk about some solutions. You have a program called Ness Health, NES Health, and it's such a profound program and a profound way to elicit positive change in the body and produce health. And so it starts with a scan where you do a scan of your body's energetic field. You see where you have the energetic blocks in the body, and then you have a protocol to clear those energetic blocks in the body. And there's so much more to it than that. That's a very simple explanation. Why don't you tell us about that?
Sure. So yeah, I mean it's pretty. it's pretty easy, really. But basically, yeah, if you put your hand on this device, we can basically scan your overall body field, which really, from this quantum aspect, we're basically looking at how that communication network is working in basically in your body, or what we call the body field, and it's identifying any distortions in that communication network, which ultimately gives us a very, very strong indication of the health and performance of all your different body systems or organ systems. And from that, we're basically able to unblock and release a lot of the energy flow back in the body, and we call that program Breakthrough Bioenergetics. And it's pretty simple, but you can basically go and see a bioenergetic practitioner either in person, or you can do it remotely, and basically the company just drop ships you a scanner and puts you in touch with a practitioner or a coach, and off you go. And basically that's just between you and the practitioner.
And tell us about the protocols you use to correct energetic functioning in the body. So you have something called infoceuticals, and then you have something called a My Health device. Can you tell us about those?
Sure. So an infoceutical, is a bit of a big, well, it's not so big a question, but basically it's this idea that we were talking about earlier of how information is able to influence patterns of energy, and how information is really like this master control system of life, and we're basically able to imprint information into a liquid, which not so dissimilar to the idea of homeopathy, and basically when you drink that liquid, that information basically goes into your body field and helps to correct the control system of the body field.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, and I've been taking infoceuticals for well over a year now, and I've really been surprised by how much better I feel. I sleep better, my mood is better, my energy is better, my overall health is better because of the positive changes I've experienced from eliciting change in my body's energetic field by feeding it corrective information. And let's talk about the My Health device.
So the My Health is basically sort of a combination of TENS, which is basically electrostimulation, and PMF, which is pulsed electromagnetic frequencies, and this concept of information. But the short version is we put information in onto an electrical signal, and you can basically release any energy blockages in a particular area of the body just by placing the device on or near that particular part.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to learn more information about that, we have a podcast from Cyril Burke and Harry talking about the My Health device. A very, very interesting podcast, has a lot of details. So tell us where one can learn more about trying out Ness, or even becoming a Ness Health practitioner.
Sure. Well, basically, you just go to the Ness Health website, which is neshealth.com. And if you go there, there's an opt-in, and you can basically watch we didn't talk about it today, but we also made some movies on this called The Living Matrix. So you can basically watch a movie that explains all of this, sort of more thoroughly, and with all of these other great characters in the movie. And you'll read everything from there.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us for the Supercharged podcast, where we trying our best to help you energize your body and your life, and help to change the course of your life and your life purpose. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you like what you heard today on the podcast, go leave us a review on iTunes. Those reviews help us to reach far more people when they're searching in iTunes for various podcasts. That we'd so appreciate you taking 2 minutes of your day to do that for us. Again, we hope this podcast helped you, and thank you so much for listening.